came back into the hospital, and the situation completely changed. And I'd only been away about, I'd been gone under an hour, and came back in, and I get ushered into a different room first of all, and there's Han. She's all wired up to all sorts of stuff. They're beeping noises and machines and things, and Hannah herself is, she's someone who likes to talk. She's very good at expressing herself, and suddenly that's not the Hannah that I'm seeing in front of me. She's kind of a bit kind of garbled. She can't quite get words out in the way that she normally would. She just doesn't seem herself. She's battling to kind of remember words. And I thought, okay, hang on a moment. I've kind of left one world, and I've come back, and now it's a different world entirely. And the change, was quite shocking. I think that's the moment where it clicked for me. Okay, this is a different direction.
EveryL Podcast. EveryL Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Matt Brown, and you're listening to the
EveryL Podcast.
Each episode, we'll have a different guest come on and talk about when life hands you an L, is it really a loss or is it something else?
Because not every L's a loss.
So sit back, relax, or do whatever you guys do to get comfortable as we get into this. Let's go. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of EveryL Podcast, where not every L is a loss. And I'm so fortunate to have the man, the myth, the legend. I have Tristan on, and I even love his name. Like, saying it sounds so lovely. This gentleman is so well spoken that he makes me seem like a commoner. And that's more because I am than anything else. However, he is the wonderful husband of Hannah. Hannah, if you don't remember a few episodes back, she was telling her story of how she wanted to explain expectation versus reality of being a preemie mum. Again, if you don't know what preemie mum is, don't worry about it. I didn't know at the time either. It's people that have premature births, and they had their child at, I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to let Tristan tell the story. Haha. So Tristan is here. He's said that he would like to talk about the same topic, and I'm absolutely here for it because I think it's going to be quite revealing to sort of say, right, this is what it looks like from the mum's point of view, which is fine because she's the one in theory that's gone on a journey with it being her body and so forth like that. Cool. But if you've got a significant other who's actively involved in this, well, technically they were involved in the beginning, but they were on the birthing journey as well. You kind of want to know what they were thinking, what they were going through, because as a birthing partner, as a husband, as a person that was involved, you're gonna feel something. And I'm just gonna throw it out there. I've got a son, expecting 2 more at the minute. Probably by the time it's out here, they're here. I felt something when I was having twins. And has anyone really asked me the question? Yeah, some of my dad friends did. Anyone else? No. Just got on with it as usual. And things like that can kind of spin you a little bit. And I think it's important that we have spaces where we can talk about how we feel and understand it's okay to feel feelings. So I'm really, really happy to have Tristan on here who's willing to share his version of events so that he can share with us what it looks like for him in that situation, and then people can compare and understand that yes, you might be going through something if you are the woman or whatever the dynamics of your relationship is, but understand that they're equally going through their own journeys. It's okay that you may not talk to each other about it, but you need to talk about it and acknowledge that each other are going through things. But I've spoken a lot. I don't normally do this, but I'm just super passionate about this. Tristan, hello sir, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. Hi, Matt. That was a very beautifully delivered intro. I think you did a good job there.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying. So as you can hear from his fantastic voice, like I need to I need to bring it, get super deep.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Tristan, for those that haven't listened to your lovely wife episode. Please tell us about who you are, how many humans you're responsible for, and a little intro about yourself before we go into what the hell you want to talk about.
Okay, all right then. So I'm a teacher by background. I work in a college in Oxfordshire, and my wife and I both work in education. In fact, we met at the same institution, and well, I guess the thing is we when we got married, we got married in our latter 30s, 36, 37. And for Han, having a child was really high on the agenda. Something that's always been very important to her as part of what she wanted from life. And I suppose I came into that with a slightly different kind of way of thinking, and it hadn't been. I wasn't ever adverse to the idea of kids, but it hadn't been something that I had really sort of thought about intensively or kind of prioritized in my way of thinking about the world and thinking about my life. So when we got married, we had quite a difficult journey in terms of conception and and getting to the point of pregnancy. And I think I kind of learnt a lot through that process, but I think it was also quite helpful that we came at it from slightly different points of view and slightly different ways of thinking, because I think that proved quite good, the kind of complementary way of working through it, because it was quite a stressful time and a difficult time for Han. And I think I was able to think about it from a slightly different angle, if that makes sense.
What angle did you come at it from compared to Hannah?
Well, I think there wasn't that overriding sense of necessity, and I think that was, there are obviously certain biological differences, as it were, but I think what that meant is that I could be there to help support Han without being. I'm not really expressing this in the right way, but I could be there for it in a way I think that I couldn't have been if we had kind of shared the same starting point. I think my ability to support and to help reassure and to think about what the alternatives might be. I think that wouldn't have been the same kind of dynamic.
So am I right in saying that it's similar to if you were both emotionally led, that probably would have been a bit chaotic. So in a sense, you was the head, the logical one, and she was the emotional one. But because you need both to actively work, you could come together and sort of approach it from a complementary way.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you've put it much better. You've said what I was trying to say, and that's exactly it. And I think that was a good thing that those differences kind of work together in that complementary way. I mean, we are Han and I are quite different people in many respects. And, some people battle to kind of put us together. You can see if they've met us both separately and they're thinking, hang on a moment. uh, and, but I think that complementary way of working is where there's a real strength for us and a fantastic kind of source for each of us, where we surprise and fascinate one another because we do approach and think about things differently and work differently, but we have the same values. I think we have those shared values at the heart of things, and it makes for a really fantastic dynamic. Yes, it was quite a journey through, and we've got our daughter Hermione, so we've got the one child. A daughter. We're not in a position where we can have more children. But I have to say that whilst I kind of started out at the beginning of all of that as someone maybe it was something that I thought would be an amazing thing, but I didn't really understand quite what it would mean to be a dad, what it would feel like. and quite how my sense of things would completely change. A friend of mine said to me before Hermione, we call her Moo, before Moo was born. He said to me, it's going to be like the curtains have just been pulled open on the window of your life, and you're going to look at things differently. And I didn't quite understand really what he meant beforehand, but I really do now. It has been quite a profound experience for me. It really has shifted my sense of things, my sense of myself, my kind of feelings about mortality, and all of that has kind of changed right round. And it's been amazing, absolutely amazing being a dad. I've loved it. So our daughter is she's 6 going on 7 now, and the impact has just been absolutely extraordinary. If I knew that beforehand, if I knew how that would be, what that experience would be like, I think my younger self coming in would have thought about things in a very, very different way. And because I have an understanding now of the meaningfulness of that. And it's come as something, I mean, I kind of knew sort of in my head that it would be important and special, but I didn't really get what that would feel like, what fatherhood would kind of mean in that visceral way. So, I'm just so grateful, to be honest, to that we've gone through that. I'm so grateful that that we have our daughter. It's just an amazing thing.
I think that's very important, and thank you for sharing. I know that, given the fact I've worked in customer service for best part of 20 years, I've always had good rapport and good empathy with people. I thought I had empathy with people about children until I had my little human. And it's sort of like, mate, there's nothing that compares. And I think I've said this before. Like, one time, my son Avery was just sitting down and he was playing together. And he tapped me and went, "Daddy, we're playing together." Oh my gosh, I didn't know I need that in my life. I was thinking, yo, just stick that in the needle and shove it in my arm. I need that in my life constantly, because I didn't
Yeah,
know, having a little child, I still don't think he's mine. He's just too cute for that. But he just look at me and he's saying, "Daddy, we're playing together." And he's got the biggest smile on his face. Like, I don't have a relationship with my dad. Well, I had, but I don't have one. I haven't spoken to him for like over 10 years. But it's like, my gosh, he's getting things that I don't think I got with my dad.
yeah,
And it's just
yeah.
mind blowing. It's like being colorblind and suddenly being seen color, thinking, hang on, what? This has been here the whole time?
That's exactly it, isn't it? Yeah,
How?
yeah,
So it's very surreal. And don't get me wrong, if you're in a position where you're unfortunately unable to have children, it is what it is. There are other ways that you can become a parent. You don't necessarily have to be their biological child. Adoption, surrogacy, IVF,
absolutely. Yeah,
probably a lot more than I'm aware of. But I just think fostering, if there any way in which you can do it, go for it. Like, literally, what have you got to lose out on other than giving a bit of yourself to someone else who it might actually make their life better and it enriches yours. But I'm not here trying to say you to have a kid, but it's expensive.
it is, and and people need to make their own choices and their own decisions, and structure their lives and in the ways that they want. But I know for me personally, that kind of it's been a revelatory experience, and I feel more human and connected with other people. A bit like you were saying, you were saying about experiencing empathy and understanding what that means. And yeah, that's absolutely it, isn't it? You feel a kind of connection with other people and with their experiences and their kind of familiar relationships. I grew up as an only child, so I didn't have any siblings, and we also lived quite a way away from my cousins. So I think perhaps in part that kind of way of growing up and not kind of experiencing interacting with older or younger siblings, or seeing sort of different relationships with parents or anything like that, I think meant that perhaps in part contributed to my lack of of understanding, and my kind of sense of things. But yeah, it's been, I'm glad that we followed that journey, and I'm really glad that Hannah has kind of brought that kind of understanding into my life and kind of helped me kind of think about the world differently alongside with having Moo. But yeah, it wasn't an easy journey to conception and pregnancy.
Before you go on, to just so people know, and obviously I know I've mentioned that your wife was on a previous episode, but just for everyone to know, that title was Expectation versus Reality of a Preemie Mum.
Yeah,
This is going to be Expectation versus Reality of a Preemie
Dad.
Dad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What was your journey like? So obviously you mentioned before, obviously, that it wasn't straightforward. You got married late in your 30s. But what did the journey look like for you? What did it entail? What emotions, what headspace was you in on that journey?
On that journey, okay. Well, I was in a different place to Han, and I think one of the differences was that I didn't have necessarily a clear set of expectations. I think Han had a much clearer sense of how she wanted things to go in terms of that journey, conception, pregnancy, birth, and how that would work. Whereas my expectations were less fixed, and I think I kind of went through that journey. But for me, it was more going through the journey as it unfolded, and I wasn't necessarily sort of mapping those things against an expectation of what that would be like. It was, just living through that experience. And I think it was very useful having those two mindsets alongside each other as we went down that pathway, because I was more, I was more relaxed is the wrong word, but I was more open to it not necessarily succeeding,
Yeah.
or thinking about what alternative things might be, like adoption and other fostering, other pathways. So I think that was good, because it helped us find a kind of balance. But when Han got pregnant, and it didn't feel quite real to me. It's kind of you know it theoretically, until we had that scan at 12 weeks, and then actually seeing those scans, seeing those images. And I can remember as we drove back from the hospital, it's kind of like, it's almost a bit like you think, okay, maybe I've kind of dreamt this. Maybe, I've kind of got the idea that we're going to have a kid, but I haven't really internalized it. I haven't really, there's part of me that thinks, well, maybe it's just not quite real, but it really is real when you see that, seeing those scan images, and really kind of having that very sort of felt sense that this is going to happen. We have a child on the way, and that was quite a magical moment for me. It felt really, really real at that point. It felt really, okay, this is going to happen. We've done this.
Right. I just love hearing the joy in your voice, because you're just reliving that life, and it's just putting such a smile on your face that it's just rich.
Well, it was it was an amazing moment. But again, that question of expectation and reality, you kind of go into that pregnancy phase, the idea of how that will all work and how that will work through. And as Anne talked about very eloquently before, she had preeclampsia and was unwell, and so our daughter came early, had to come early, and was born 2 months before her due date. So we were on this. We'd gone through this kind of sort of more difficult route through to conception. That had taken a long time, in various stages to that, and moments where we thought it wasn't going to happen. And then it was like, okay, now we're on the conventional path. Now we're on the now it's going to work like this, and these are the stages, and you're going to have your antenatal classes, and you're going to go through all the kind of, the ritual and the surrounding stuff. It takes you through to that point of giving birth. But it didn't end up working out in that way, and it spun around very quickly. So we had we'd moved house because we just needed to be somewhere a little bit bigger. So sort of in the latter end, the further end of the pregnancy, and we were back in work. It was a Monday. Han wasn't feeling that well, a bit sort of under the weather. We weren't quite sure of things. I thought it was probably just a cold. And so Monday morning, head into work as usual. Han's going to go and see the doctor, just to go and check things out. So she's not feeling great. So the day starts on a very normal kind of path, and then I get called by the receptionist at work. She comes to find me, and she says, "You've got to phone your wife. You haven't answered calls from your wife. You need to phone your wife." So I thought, "Oh my God, what's happened?" And I looked at my phone and realised I had some missed calls.
Hang on. Sorry. Hang on. So everyone back up, right. So Tristan is saying his pregnant wife was calling him.
It's true.
And he's there saying, "What's happening?"
Yeah.
She's pregnant.
Yeah, it is true. It is to my shame. Yeah. I
can't defend you on that one. I'm sorry.
You can't defend me on that. You can't. No. I can't defend myself on that one.
Oh gosh, at least you're going to give me a different version of the story just to save face.
No, I'm not going to save face on it.
It's fine.
Yeah. But I wasn't. I mean, I wasn't kind of expecting. I wasn't kind of expecting how the day was going to go. And so she rings me up and she says she's got to go into the doctor. She's got to go into hospital. She's got very high blood pressure. They want to check things out. They want her to go in, ASAP. So it's a kind of, oh, okay, right. So okay, put everything down, and and it's, I'll be home shortly, and we'll get in there, and we'll get things checked out. And the kind of impression I had in my head was, well, we'll just be going in. We'll be in there for a few hours in the afternoon. They'll do a few readings, and and then that will be it. But that isn't at all how it went. So we go in and take her in. They run some tests. They worried about the blood pressure. Han seems fine in herself. She seems okay. They say, look, we're probably going to want to keep her in a bit longer, keep her in overnight, and see how things are. Probably a good idea if you go back and get some stuff, and bring it back in. Nothing to worry about, but we just think it'll be a good precaution. So I went, okay, all right then. So popped home. That's when I managed to get the wrong underwear. I'm not coming out well in this at all, am I? Grabbed a bag, grabbed some stuff, and came back into the hospital, and the situation completely changed. And I'd only been away about, I'd been gone under an hour, and came back in, and I get ushered into a different room first of all, and there's Han. She's all wired up to all sorts of stuff. They're beeping noises and machines and things. And and Hannah herself is, she's someone who likes to talk. She's very good at expressing herself, and suddenly that's not the hand that I'm seeing in front of me. She's kind of a bit kind of garbled. She can't quite get words out in the way that she normally would. She just doesn't seem herself. She's battling to kind of remember words. And I thought, okay, hang on a moment. I've kind of left one world, and I've come back, and now it's a different world entirely. And the change, was quite shocking. I think that's the moment where it clicked for me. Okay, this is a different direction.
Yeah.
This is not just a quick checkup. Something, this is not good. And one of the doctors there sort of took me out and spoke to me a bit in the corridor, and said, look, with these issues with the preeclampsia and what we're looking at here, we're really worried about your wife's well-being. We're worried about her health, and we think that we think that we're going to have to move. We're going to have to do something in terms of the baby, and we think we need to start to get things ready, and look at doing a cesarean, and giving birth, as it were. And it's like a kind of, okay, hang on a moment. So my day started in one way. It was a sunny, nice, warm morning. I'm going into work. I just think my wife's got a bit of a cold, but she's going to go and check it out. And then suddenly by the late afternoon, it's like, okay, so my baby is going to be born, tomorrow, or in a few hours, at some point shortly. And and this is a potentially really, well, this very serious situation. My wife's health is at risk, and this is gonna happen. And things just went up a whole notch. But they were really good in the hospital. We were in the Royal Berks in Reading, and we were lucky too in that there was a nurse assigned, a lovely Brazilian lady, and she was fantastic at sort of calming us down, and kind of talking things through. And basically they explained what they needed to do, and that they'd need to basically try and prep things, and they'd sort of help to try and help get everything ready, and make sure that Han was in the best position, and the baby was in the best position for a premature birth. And they'll be looking to potentially do this in the morning, and through the night they needed to sort of change the medications and the infusions, and so we were awake a long way through the night. And this lovely nurse was kind of there, chatting through most of the night, sort of normalizing things, and making things sort of comfortable, and being a reassuring presence. So she was absolutely fantastic. So we got a bit of sleep that night. I was in some chairs kind of together, next to my wife's bed, and then the following morning, they prepped things, and then we went in for the cesarean, sort of mid-morning. So it all moved quite rapidly. But I think through that, you have the kind of adrenaline of the moment, and it carries you through, and then there you are, just going into the theatre. But again, for the staff working there, they kind of normalize things in a rather wonderful way, because we came in, into have the cesarean. You've just you've got the radio playing. They're chatting about normal things.
Yeah. What am I having for lunch?
Yeah, exactly. And then this momentous thing is going to happen for you, in the middle of this normality. But it's just a reminder of how life works, doesn't it? The most important things to us do just happen in the middle of other people's normality, don't they?
Correct. Yeah.
And I thought, I thought they put it this sort of like a kind of curtain thing in front of her, so that she couldn't see what they were doing when they cut in to do the cesarean. And I thought, yeah, I'm okay with this. I'm not too queasy. I'll look over. I'll cast a glance and see what's happening.
Why?
So I'm standing there, kind of holding her hand. Cast a glance over, turn deathly pale.
Mate.
Turn back to Han, holding her hand even more tightly. But yeah, and then out came this teeny baby, and it was nothing at all how we had planned or thought, what was going to happen. But there she was, and they lift her out, and she made this little mewing sound, and it was just this wonderful sound. And then they lifted her over, and asked me across to cut the umbilical cord. And I hadn't quite processed that I'd be doing that stuff, in that moment. I can remember the feeling of they gave me these tiny little nail scissors, and you're trying to, there I am, and I'm trying to cut through. And it's actually quite difficult to do. The scissors didn't feel quite up to the task. It's quite, it's quite a, I'm sort of trying to get my way through that cord, and I'm standing there doing it. And again, that was one of those moments, again, a bit like seeing the scan, where you think, okay, this is real.
Yeah.
And this is it. This is it's happened.
You're kind of brought back to the present. You're no longer living in the future, planning things. It's sort of like,
no, there you are. There's your child, these tiny little nail scissors, and you're trying to cut through this thing, and it's not quite. You think you're just going to go snip, but no,
it's not a ribbon.
it's not a ribbon. No, it's not a ribbon. And the realness of it is kind of like time just suddenly stops at that moment, and you're kind of, the reality of it is just so much there, and she made these lovely sounds, and they kind of wrap her up. They had, with premature babies, they often put them into a bag, basically, shortly after they're born, to try and keep them warm, and kind of try to reduce the kind of the trauma, essentially, to the child. So they had this bag ready, and it felt a bit like they've got like a shopping bag. It felt a bit like that. They're going to pop her in a. It feels a bit. They didn't have to use it. It's not actually a shopping bag, but it didn't look too dissimilar. And it's it was strange. And then they took her, move across, and Han got to hold her. And then, of course, it's into the incubator, and they whip her away. They've got to make sure that that she's that she's okay, and take her up to to Nike to be looked after. And that was there we were. That was we'd had our baby, not in any way that we had expected to. But Han was really still quite unwell. She stayed on in the hospital for another couple of weeks. And particularly for the first few days afterwards, she was really weak, really struggling, to be honest. And so it was quite a it was there was this joy on the one hand of you've got your baby, and I went up to see her in NICU just a little later, and there she is. That's this beautiful tiny thing, and you're kind of looking at her in disbelief. You can't believe that that this is your child. I mean, and she was teeny, and there were some other children around her who had also had various difficulties, who were much bigger, being born born at their due date. And it was really quite strange, because for me, Moo's size, that seemed normal. That's the size, it's my child, so that's the size, this tiny baby. These other babies, they seem too big.
You was in there for too long.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be. This is this, and the nurse, let me hold her, but I was doing that without Han. Han at that point was too unwell. She's back in the room. She's not able physically to get from where she is in her room up to the ward upstairs where Moo's in the incubator. So on the one hand, it's this just extraordinary moment of holding your child, but on the other hand, that your wife, your child's mother is not there too, sharing that moment. And so coming back to see Han again, and I said, I've just got to hold her. I'm buzzing from just having got to hold her. But of course, that was brutal for Han, because she couldn't get to do that at that moment. There we are on the day of the birth. She's not well enough to be able to do that, and it's really upsetting and difficult for her. So part of you is buzzing, and part of you is really incredibly worried about your wife and how she is and her health. And then there's the kind of you how do you bring these two things together in that moment? And it's the sort of that double whammy.
Sounds bittersweet.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And so it was a very sort of quite a sort of torn time, but again, all praise to the Royal Berks and the way they handled things, because they actually managed to find a single room for Han to be in, rather than having to go back onto the ward. And because they were sensitive to the fact that here she was, they didn't want her necessarily to have to be next to another mum who had her baby next to her, having given birth, and has her baby there with her, and for Han to be there and to be separated from her child. I mean, we managed to get Han up, sort of wheelchaired her up to go and see Moo, and see our daughter there, together and hold her. But it was a sort of conflicting emotions, at that one point, in different kinds of worry. But the thing about Moo was that she seemed so strong, so tiny, but really strong, and she was there in her incubator, and she just didn't stop. She didn't stop moving. She was very sort of, she would move. She was sort of moving herself around the incubator, and she's got her kind of wires, into her, and all these things going on, and these special lights, and you've got all of that kind of, medical apparatus and stuff. But for me, there was this tremendous sense of reassurance that she just seemed strong in and of herself. I didn't feel like I had any doubts that this was going to be okay. I felt this kind of sense of faith that it was going to be okay. Which I'm very appreciative of. Um, yeah, and it's a whole different sort of experience, really, because you're not, my friend, a friend of mine had talked to me about, when they'd had their child and just sort of being presented with the child and then going home, and then that's it. You're kind of, oh my God, I'm on my own. What do I do now? How do I handle this? I mean, I must say, this is going to sound like a weird thing to say, but an almost advantage, and I use that word hesitantly, but an advantage of the way things kind of worked was because our baby was then in hospital for an extended period. You do get perhaps a more gradual process in some respects, in that you're not at home immediately on your own. You do have that kind of support net of the hospital, and you're in and out of the hospital, and that's exhausting. But you are kind of learning to do things with that support around you, and in conjunction with the nurses. And I quite liked that, because I felt a bit like a kind of parental apprenticeship. You're getting used to what you're going to have to do on your own, in due course. But yeah, so Han was in for a couple of weeks, and that, so she got stronger, and visiting me was easier, and she knew that she was in the same building as her. She knew that Moo wasn't too far away. But then Han came home, and of course Moo's still in the hospital, and that's difficult. That's hard, and of course life keeps on going. So I'm back in work as well, and then we're having to get to and fro, basically, to try and visit the hospital, you know, um, a couple of times a day, and have that time with our child, and that's, it's very, very difficult for Han. Really, really hard, that separation, over that time. Less difficult for me, in some respects, and I kind of appreciated the apprenticeship, that the hospital provided you with. But I think, because of the circumstances of the birth and the unexpectedness of it, and because of Han being so unwell, I think really a very difficult experience for her. Really, really traumatic experience. And for for me, I kind of, I'd said earlier that my kind of, I had some expectations as to how this all would work, um, but it wasn't. I was okay with the events on, taking the path that they were taking, and I had this kind of sense of faith that this is going to be okay. This is going to work. And it's just something about Moo. It just felt like, this is, she's strong. She's, she's a fighter. And, and maybe that's, maybe it's a bit naive on my part, kind of thinking in that way. But so again, I think that was useful. It was good that I kind of taken it, had that slightly sort of complementary way of working through that experience. And I felt that we learned a lot through that. Our daughter kind of made her way through the stages, the markers, quite successfully. We saw around us difficulties with some other kids where it wasn't quite so linear. Where you weren't moving forward. It was more two steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Whereas Mood felt very, very sort of methodical as she kind of hit the right markers in order to be able to come home. I mean, we one of the big things was her being able to feed, and that's an important part for a preemie baby, being able to
As
come
in
home.
breastfeed or just
Well,
any?
being able, yeah. So the drive in the first instance is for breastfeeding. That was quite hard because, of course, where we were within the pregnancy presents difficulties, because you're not ready. You're not in, your body's not necessarily in the right place.
Yeah.
There's also the
Time-wise.
fact, yeah, and the baby's very small. The baby's mouth is very small, and bringing that all together, can be, it was difficult. So we had to make a decision, really, that we wanted to focus on the bottle feeding route and prioritize that, and kind of getting our daughter onto the bottle, because that would enable us to reach the point where she could come home, rather than pushing down the breastfeeding route, which was a more problematic route. And there are all sorts of kind of expectations, aren't there, and kind of conventions and attitudes that kind of come into play, which can make things quite difficult. And I think there are pressures on mothers, in that respect, that are often quite unfair. So we had those difficulties, but I was really appreciative of the fact that that we had that we went down that formula bottle fed route, because it did mean that for me as a dad, I could be part of that process, and I could share some of that burden, and be part of that in a way that I wouldn't necessarily have been otherwise. And so, when Moo came back home, and you've got all the feed and the routines and the up and the, I felt like, I really had a real part to play in that process. And it's quite, it's an important thing.
First of all, I've got to say thank you very much for sharing all that you did, because don't get me wrong, at some points I feel like when my guests are so kind and gracious to share intimate parts of their life, you kind of feel like I'm not trying to pull off this scab and cause you pain and discomfort. But hearing you smile and laugh throughout some of the moments made it that much better, because I know that it's not just grim. There was high points within it. And it's nice to hear that so many years, 6 going on 7 years later,
Yeah,
you're still got that with you. But There's a couple of questions I'd like to ask, if possible.
Of course, yeah.
And one of them is, obviously, you said you approached the pregnancy slightly different to your wife, but when you saw how she was reacting in maybe not the most positive way when you're getting when you wasn't conceiving as quick as you may have liked to, how did that make you feel?
How did it make me feel? I wouldn't say that it wasn't the most positive way, because it which how Han felt.
That was me misspeaking.
No. How Han felt was absolutely
It was justified.
justified and understandable, absolutely. And it's a very difficult, invasive thing. Um, but how did I feel? I think I was. This is the weird thing. If knowing what I do now of the experience of fatherhood and parenting, if I were to have that knowledge and be back in that position, then I I couldn't be as um, phlegmatic about it as I was then. You know what I mean? And I think I was much more okay. It will be what it will be. And we will be where we will end up, and whatever that is, I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, for me, I wanted to be with Han. That's the person I want to spend my life with. And if the child part of it, if that doesn't work out, that's okay. That my first commitment is my wife. And so I was, and I think also, again, partly having been an only child too meant that I didn't necessarily have a full sense of what you inevitably, as an only child, I think you have a slightly more kind of self-interested view of the world, perhaps. Not I don't mean selfish necessarily, but a more kind of you know your orientation is slightly different. And so I was, the kind of self-contained nature of what life might be like without a child. I was okay with that. And yeah, so it was, I think I could help sell what that might be, and reassure Han that for me, it wasn't, this wasn't a be all and end all thing. But it was difficult because it makes you acutely aware of the fact that we are our biology. We are creatures of flesh and blood, and we're determined by our bodies, aren't we? And there are things that are beyond our control. And that we often don't think of ourselves quite in that way, but in a situation like that, it makes you realize how real that is. And and those limitations are there, and you have to work within them. So it wasn't an easy process. I couldn't now go through that process thinking in that way. I'd be very different. But I think it actually was very helpful that was where I was at that point in time.
Because obviously after you spoke, I was thinking probably not the word positive I was looking for. Optimistic
Optimistic, yeah,
is
yeah.
probably the word would have been more suitable for the situation, because ultimately getting told that probably won't happen. How can you respond positive to that realistically?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard, but you can be optimistic, which some people can misinterpret as being positive. But if someone's just told you there's a high percentage of it not happening, that is like, oh well, yeah. So that's something I hold my
Yeah,
hands up.
exactly. No, 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 no.
No, no, no. But the thing is, right? That's one thing about me. I've got no shame in holding it. Like if I said something wrong, I'll hold my hands up to it, and I would like to be that transparent with people so that just because if you're going to be as transparent as you are with me, I've got to hold my hands up. I've got to be that way, and I think a lot of us will in society will be better off for it and not hide behind filters and editing and
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
else, thinking, oh, we're perfect all the time. We're not. We're human. We're fallible. It's that is life.
yeah, yeah,
One thing I want to ask you, because it's really, really important to me to ask this question, because I know I wanted to know the answer.
yeah,
When Hannah was going through what she was going through, and she was, in hospital, not speaking as she normally was do,
yeah,
how did you feel at that point? Like, how did you feel about the well-being of your child? Because I'll admit something on here, right? That I didn't think I'd ever admit on a podcast, and that's the fact that I always had a fear that if my wife was to go into labor and
yeah,
they said it was
yeah,
either my wife or my child,
yeah, yeah,
that would be one of my biggest fears because I wouldn't want them to make me choose, and I know who I would choose in that instance, and I'll be 100 with it. I would pick my wife. I
yeah,
would pick my wife because
yeah,
that's who I'm. That's my ride and die.
yeah,
That's who
yep,
it is.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know this
yeah,
other person. I'd hate for the
yeah,
person to grow up, tell me one day they hate me. Don't get me wrong, they're a child. They probably don't know what we're talking about, but they hate me. But I'm here
yeah,
without
yeah,
my wife, the person I've been with for more times for a bigger portion of my life together than I have been alone.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and that was in a sense, it wasn't quite like that, but in one way, it wasn't too far off because the the question was, what's the priority here? And with hands, with the preeclampsia and the risk to hands' health, it was obvious that the safe thing to do for was to move forward and with the cesarean with the birth and that was crucially important as it was put to me for Han. And you're right. I mean, you don't, the at that point, absolutely, that's the person, that's your commitment. That's um, um, you know, yeah. So it was a strange moment, and it didn't. I think in the moment itself, there in the hospital, it didn't quite feel real.
Yeah,
And you're just kind of okay, that's your advice. We go with that. You guys are the professionals, and I take your guidance. But it all felt slightly unreal in that moment. Unlike when it came to that moment of, as I said, cutting the umbilical cord, where suddenly everything felt incredibly real.
yeah.
And suddenly that kind of bubble of unreality had just been burst, and now this is you're there.
Can I can I ask that question? I'm trying not to disrupt your train of thought here,
Yeah,
but when I have a sense of being present, I have it for me, the way I'll describe it is the fact I can feel everything. Normally, muscle memory will kick in for half, well, a bigger portion of half of what I do. But all of a sudden, I can feel everything. I can feel my toes in my socks, in my shoes. I can feel the clothes on my back. I can hear like I'm there. I can feel the dust particles hitting my face. That's how I felt when it was my son being born. And it was like tomorrow didn't exist.
yeah, yeah.
There
That's
wasn't a
it. Yeah,
yesterday. There was only right now.
yeah, yeah,
Was that the same for you?
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. It's like nothing else matters, and everything else just takes on, its true significance, maybe. And you're there in that, in that time, and you're not thinking about other things.
Like your friend says, you pull back that curtain.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I mean, it's it's an incredible thing. It is an incredible thing, and I'm very grateful for I'm very grateful for everything that happened. And even though one wouldn't necessarily want things to happen in that way, I can't thinking back, and I can't think of it happening in any other way. And I didn't have to be. I wasn't physically ill like my wife was, and that's very different when you're actually physically ill, and you have that whole level of impact. But it doesn't. For me, the whole experience feels special and amazing. I know that for Ham, one of the things that she sort of struggled with a little was that sense of almost kind of grieving the kind of lost pregnancy and the kind of normal birth experience, and the kind of,
And when we say normal, we mean it in quotation marks
in
here.
quotation mark, exactly,
Yeah.
because there isn't a normal. Exactly right. I think she felt that kind of sense of loss, which is absolutely understandable, and she's at the sharp end of it in a way that I can't even imagine. Um, but for me, I things happened as they happened, and I'm really grateful for them in that sense. I haven't ever felt a sense of loss in that respect. It's felt, and I think there are kind of, we were talking about expectations and reality and how those things sort of collide with one another, and I think there, we came at things with some different expectations, perhaps, which shape, your kind of sense of the experience. But the beautiful thing for me is the way that comes together, the way that difference comes together into a whole, and you can't have the one thing without the other thing. It all works, you know.
No,
Yeah.
so looking back at that, if it's not an L, what are you calling it?
If it's not an L, I mean, it, it, having a child is probably the single most significant thing, I think, for me, that I've experienced easily. It's a gift, really, I guess. I think that's probably the word that I'd want to use, and that's really enriched everything about my life, and I'm really grateful for it. And I'm really grateful for um, things that kind of lead you through into your life, and you know the odds of Hannah and I meeting each other, and forming this relationship, having this child, the odds in some respects are against it, aren't they?
Yeah.
that these things happen, and that you have these opportunities, and that you're able to form these extraordinary bonds. And so I am, immensely grateful for that gift, because it, has enriched my life immeasurably.
You sound like an incredible guy who just seems like you was always on the up with everything that was going on. And I only wish I had a fraction of your strength. I think I've only developed some of that now because of my family. But you just sound so well put together and held together, and just
Well, I sound that way.
that's all right.
At this moment.
That's fine. We'll get you back on for the uncensored version. Matt, I was bricking it the whole time. I didn't know what to do. But I would like to use this question because I like to ask people this question. Like you've already mentioned before, if you knew then what you know now, it's fine. But if you could go, like I didn't hear a particular low point that you may have felt. I could be wrong. But if you could go back
Yeah,
in time and talk to your younger self at a low point you was going through during that pregnancy journey,
yeah.
when would that time be, and what would you say to yourself?
I think I'd want my younger self to actually really understand what the meaningfulness of it all would be, and that it was so much bigger than I kind of thought of it at the start of of that journey. I think I really hadn't grasped that at all, and in a way maybe that would have made it a different process, a different kind of process altogether. But I think I think I do wish I'd had more of a sense of that and how important it would be to me ultimately. I think I quite got it.
That's fine, and
Yeah,
I think we all
yeah,
experience it in a
yeah,
very different way. I've spoken on a podcast previously with someone that's on this podcast and someone else I'm going to get as a guest on this podcast, and we'll talk about grieving, about grieving over like pregnancy. Because if you're a woman, obviously it's
yeah,
very apparent that your
yeah.
career could be put on hold or
Oh,
stopped
absolutely.
altogether,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
the argument could be, well, men can crack on and do their own thing. And we was having a healthy conversation about it, saying, well, not necessarily, because if you're a guy that's ready to be a parent, you're active in that child's life, you're kind of already prepped for it, and then you've got those that are not there, and they might grieve a life they had. So we had a healthy conversation, right? And spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't seen it or heard it, sorry, I went through a grieving process and I fully understood it because I was prepared to have a second child, not a second and a third, because the reality I'd constructed for myself was being dismantled. Well, no, that's a lie. It was bulldozed over straight away. And I was trying to salvage whatever I could out of this to build up the future. And now I think I'm close to getting there, but I'm now knowing the reality that I'm going to have going forward means the version of myself I thought I was going to be is a different version
yeah,
altogether. And that's
yeah,
hard. And it's something where you talking about going back and understanding it. Obviously, that was your first pregnancy. This is
yeah.
my second pregnancy I'm going through.
That's it. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I have a
yeah,
better understanding of how to be. But again, I'm very aware, especially listening to you talk, that I've probably slightly detached myself from certain aspects of it because to support my wife, I can't be all in my feelings. I have to
yeah,
to be in my head and say, it's not nice to leave you there, but I need to so that we can progress forward in the things that we need
yeah,
to do.
yeah, yeah,
And I think you shared such clear, intimate parts of it that yeah, we do go through things as guys in this pregnancy, whether it be birthing partners or significant other, whatever your role is in that, your dynamics, your relationship. And I think it's important that we have that. Um, I'm very conscious of time, but I would like to ask you, what support did you have throughout this? And did you speak to anyone?
I I didn't I didn't speak to anyone in any sort of professional way, but I did have supportive people that I work with, and they were really helpful through that, you know, in just sort of giving me space and time initially, but also in understanding and caring and asking about, you know what was happening. Um, I think I think the Han and I think the Can was my biggest support through it, um, and although for her, you know, the trauma of it and the difficulty of it is, you know, I think, you know, much more intense. But there's something about, you know, Han has this way of interpreting experience and reading experience that's really helpful for me. I think she helps me get it, you know,
Yeah.
in a more visceral way. Yeah, Yeah. So I think that's so I'd say that the support was in going through that experience together, the two of us, and knowing that we're in this, and we've got one another, and we will get there. I think that was the key thing. It felt like it was a good, in terms of our kind of bond. It really intensified that.
That's really positive. And I could talk to you all day if possible, but gotta leave things for other people. So what I would like to say is thank you once again for being so open and candid about everything. I always like it because it feels like people are peering behind the veil of people's lives, because on the face of it, we live in the social media world where everything is pretty much heavily edited and no one really knows what's going on. And for someone like me growing up, I used to watch things like My Wife and Kids, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and so forth, wondering how am I going to get from where I am to that position. And there was too many blank spaces because on the TV show, they edit it, obviously. Life, you can't edit it like that. You've still got to go through that journey, but you don't know what that journey looks like if no one's showing you. But I would like to think that with this platform, people are being able to see what real people are really going through. And as strong as you look, the reason you're strong is because you've had a pretty hard past, but you've come through the other side in a positive light. And I just don't want people to feel alone. It's so hard to think that people are going through life thinking that it's a personal attack on them.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. We're not alone, aren't we? There's so much that joins us together. And you were talking earlier about empathy and one's sense of empathy changing with parenthood, and that sense of being human, and that connection with other people. You feel part of a kind of community of experience, and the more people talk about things, Matt, that's so important, isn't it? In all of our understanding, that we have that common experience where we're not alone in going through stuff. We're much more alike than we think.
That is very true. So I'm going to ask you to please share where you're at for if people want to reach out to you and learn more about you, your experiences and stuff like that.
You mean share where I'm at, as in?
If you're on socials.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
No,
not asking for your home
yeah.
address. Come on now. I'm not that. No.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and my handle is Dory Forrest, DoryPhorus 7. Basically, that's me on both those platforms. I'm not massively good on social media, in that I'm a kind of irregular inhabitant.
He says that. And have you got anything going on anything that people can check out that you're doing, or just reach out to you as and when?
Oh, just reach out to me as and when. I haven't ever done anything like this before,
Ooh,
and it's been a really. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed chatting to you.
much appreciated. Well, thank you very much for your time. So thank you very much, Tristan. Again, I love your name. Unfortunately, it's not the name of my child. I did look it up, but I do want to thank you very much for your openness, your honesty, taking us on that journey, and just reliving it again, because I can only imagine it can evoke some emotions. But I'm hoping for all the listeners out there, however many or however few you are, I hope that you understand that we are all going through our own things. The pregnancy journey that we think is a normal pregnancy with quotation marks isn't necessarily what we see on TV or what we see on social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is unique, it is personal,
Yeah,
and I think it's fair to say there's no harm in just reaching out to those that are going through it and just not making an assumption that everything is A okay, or B going left.
yeah,
Just be open to whatever answer they give you or whatever response it is, and just try and be supportive.
yeah,
But yeah, thank you very much everyone to listening. I understand it's a long episode, but I think it's important that we get this conversation out there, let people hear what other people have to say about various topics, and just understand that you're not alone, you're not isolated. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, and just don't carry the burden on your shoulders. Yes, the EveryL podcast. Just remember, not every L is a loss. And also, one thing that I've said repeatedly in episodes is that nothing about a caterpillar tells you it's going to be a butterfly. And that's something that we should all hold on to as long as possible. Please do me a massive favor. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please just rate it, review it, so that more people can get an earshot of this. And we'll obviously share it to other people that can be encouraged by it. If you're on Spotify, follow it, rate it as well. And any feedback, greatly appreciate. Constructive feedback. Anything else I might ignore. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, whatever you're doing, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.
EveryL Podcast. EveryL Podcast. EveryL Podcast.